and welcome to Rising. Robby, I see you're a little surprised there that I am opening the segment today.
Do you see the words were about to come out of my mouth?
I feel like a ventriloquist. All right, I'm not going to throw you off too much. We just thought we'd try something different this morning.
I love it. All about trying new things.
What's on the docket for us today, Robby?
Well, Briahna, I would be happy to tell you. The Biden administration launched another round of airstrikes against Houthi targets in Yemen. Per the U.S. military, the strike successfully destroyed rebel military sites used in the ongoing blockade of the Red Sea. Now, yesterday, President Biden redesignated the Houthis as a terrorist group after removing them from the list less than a month after taking office. Now, in a State Department release, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that the move came in recognition of the dire humanitarian situation in Yemen. He added, quote, "These attacks against international shipping have endangered mariners, disrupted the free flow of commerce, and interfered with navigational rights and freedoms."
Meanwhile, displaced Palestinians sheltering at the largest remaining hospital left in southern Gaza were forced to evacuate overnight as intense fighting nearby threatened the hospital. This video, verified by the New York Times, shows families fleeing amidst echoes of heavy gunfire. ABC News details mounting frustrations between President Biden and Benjamin Netanyahu. According to multiple senior administration officials, the growing divide between Bibi and Biden on Israel's current handling of the conflict, plus its plans for post-war Gaza, has become more pronounced since Secretary of State Blinken's visit to Israel. The Biden administration's tightrope walk became even clearer during Blinken's visit to Davos this week. Let's watch.
The choice is there, and ultimately, this is about choices. What kind of society do we want to live in? What kind of world do we want to live in? What kind of region do we want to live in? We talk a lot as well today about regionalization. There's a profound opportunity for regionalization in the Middle East, in the greater Middle East, that we have not had before. The challenge is realizing it.
Does Israel have the prime minister for that opportunity?
Look, these are decisions for Israelis to make. This is a profound decision for the country as a whole to make.
Blinken's feet were put to the fire again during this next viral moment. Let's watch.
One of the things you hear so often from people, given the high civilian casualties in Gaza, is, does the United States, do Jewish lives matter more than Palestinian and Muslim lives, and Palestinian Christian lives, given the incredible asymmetry in casualties? And I've been asked that. I want to give you a chance to respond to that.
No. Period. For me, I think for so many of us, what we're seeing every single day in Gaza is gut-wrenching.
You know, it's interesting to hear him say, he asked, is Netanyahu the right man for this job? And you know, there are serious issues that some people have with Netanyahu, even from the standpoint of, you know, totally disabling Hamas and the political opposition to the state of Israel among the Palestinians, given that there are questions about Netanyahu's own support implicitly propping up Hamas as a buffer against other Palestinian groups. So, you know, you could be a total hardliner on Israel or in support of Israel and still have those questions. But he says there, you know, that's an issue for Israel to decide. I think it's the blank check nature of it, that Americans being asked, we're going to pay for this, for the Israeli war effort in Gaza. We now know, we knew it already, but it's making the U.S. less safe. It's led indirectly to attacks on U.S. vessels in the Red Sea. It's raised tensions between our government and Iran and so many other Arab countries. And then to say, so obviously Blinken and Biden are making the calculation, well, it's all worth it because we want to support Israel. But then we can have no say over how it's used or what Israel's policy will be or how its government should be comprised. That seems so unfair from an America First standpoint.
So first of all, America has not had any shyness about doing a coup and toppling governments and changing leaders all over the world. That it's suddenly acting bashful about that prospect or the implications of that and built into the question there is kind of laughable. Of course, I don't support that kind of behavior. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty. I think you're absolutely right. The question isn't whether the U.S. gets an opportunity to choose who leads Israel. The point is whether or not the U.S. has in its own capacity as an independent country can bring an end to this conflict, largely because without our aid, both military and broader financial aid, Israel would not be able to conduct this war. Specifically, I saw Jeremy Scahill over at The Intercept wrote a whole long piece about this, and he tweeted yesterday in response to U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, tweet about how the humanitarian cause is so important and how tough things are for people in Gaza. He replied, "What is remarkable here is that there appears to be no attachment to the reality that it is the U.S. that has armed Israel, prevented a ceasefire, but with these UN vetoes, and served as Israel's chief political and diplomatic protector throughout the indiscriminate bombing and invasion of Gaza." So for Blinken to be asked, do Palestinian lives matter as much as Israeli lives? And to say, well, no, they don't. Of course, it's so sad that these Palestinian lives are being killed. And to not then acknowledge the extent to which they're literally being killed with American bombs and with American funding and with American agency, that is a huge effort to gaslight the American people.
And without any American input and oversight. That seems to be the entire policy of the Biden administration. We're going to, in terms of when he decided to make nice with Saudi Arabia after condemning Saudi Arabia while he was running for president, Biden did.
Right.
Does the fist bump with the sheik. Okay, but then when we have our own oil crisis, they don't open up. They don't let the oil flow. Like, what are we getting out of this diplomacy?
Well, I mean,
what do we like? I want to actually have a leadership that puts America first, that either zealously guards the taxpayers' money or at least spends it in a way that is productive to our own interests and our own policies. What are we getting out of this, what seems like an entirely one-sided relationship
It's
with
also
Israel?
important to know that what is Israel getting out of this? Netanyahu is largely understood to be chasing this conflict and really benefiting politically from this conflict as someone who is facing really significant legal woes in Israel at this time. He's in a weirdly similar situation to Trump, where his status as prime minister helps to insulate him against some of the culpability for the legal charges that he's facing. And moreover, here's what's really perverse about Blinken's framing here, and some of the broader framing that you're seeing really pushed in the mainstream media that says, Biden is trying to talk to Bibi, but Bibi is intractable. Biden really wishes this weren't happening. He's concerned about the humanitarian effects in Gaza, but gosh, there's nothing he can do about it. That really flies in the face, one, of the fact that obviously we're funding this war, and cutting off funding could bring an end almost immediately to not just this immediate conflict in Gaza, but the escalation we're seeing in the region. And two, there has been an admission from Anthony Blinken that the excuse that's given for why this wildly disproportionate siege has to continue. Again, over 24,000 Palestinians killed after 1,200 Israelis were killed on October 7th, is that we have to defeat Hamas. Here's what Blinken told Netanyahu, according to reporting from NBC News, about that fight against Hamas. He said, ultimately, there is no military solution to Hamas, according to the officials, and that the Israeli leader needs to recognize that or history will repeat itself and violence will continue. But the officials say Netanyahu was unmoved. Well, if our own government is taking the position that there's nothing about this conflict that's geared toward actually meeting Israel's stated goal of ending Hamas, then at a certain point you are acknowledging that the bombs that are being dropped on Gaza, the white phosphorus that is being dropped on Gaza, the hospitals that are being bombed, the universities that are being demolished with set charges. This is not warfare. This is charges being set in universities, soldiers walking away and exploding them, are geared towards something else. And when you're looking at the systematic destruction of infrastructure in Gaza, what it looks like is an intent to prevent any Palestinians from really returning and living there, destroying all your cultural institutions, your religious institutions, your libraries, your government buildings, your universities. And that is why there is this argument that's being made that it really isn't about Hamas, that this is about ethnic cleansing and genocide. I
don't quite see it that way. They're at war with Hamas. They were attacked by Hamas, and Hamas has not surrendered, and they're engaged in total war to defeat them, which involves and is involving
collective punishment, which is a war crime.
Okay, yeah. Look, we disagree. Obviously, that's fine. I don't have a problem necessarily with them pursuing the goal of totally eliminating Hamas
even
and
if that goal is not achievable
until
by their own admission.
That's what we said. We don't have. Blinken said that.
Yes.
Well, we don't have to support it or aid them in what we think is an ultimately futile effort that is costing us money and making us less safe. They want to pursue total war against an organization, a terrorist group that attacked them, that has not surrendered. That's their business, and they can pursue that if they want. We don't have to be there to help to endlessly support it. I wouldn't support it at all every step of the way.
And to block them from being held accountable in front of international tribunals that are trying to weigh in on this question of whether or not they are in fact violating international law and committing genocide.
Yeah, I mean, so does Russia, so does China. We don't, I don't love the idea of Israel being uniquely and only held up.
It's not
for
uniquely
its
and only
crimes.
held up. What's unique about Israel is that it is not held up for these kinds of crimes the way the other parts of the world are. The U.S. isn't throwing itself on the grenade and vetoing charges against Russia or China for their war crimes. Now, they have more power on the National Security Council,
They're vetoing
and they can do it for
they
themselves.
Are vetoing them.
But this is about America's actions, because that's the country we live in, and that's the audience that we're speaking to, whether or not America is treating Israel differently and protecting it from the same kind of judgments that the international community, legal community, makes about the rest of the world on a regular basis. Is it only the global South? Is it only certain kinds of countries that have to be held accountable to international law? That's the question right now that's being really adjudicated in front of the ICJ. We'll have more follow-ups on that and more. Stick around. Robby is going to tell you what's on his radar coming up next.